on guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here. Today, I want to talk to you about a novel that I read somewhat recently, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I say Tolkien. I don't know if it's Tolkien or Tolkien. It's spelled Tolkien, but I've always heard it pronounced Tolkien. Anyway, this book, or this copy of the book, is about 300-ish pages, and this book was written back in the 1930s. I read this in preparation for my sister coming to visit over the Christmas holiday. She brought with her the Hobbit extended edition of the movies. I had not seen any of these movies before. I had watched the theatrical cut for the first two Hobbit movies many years ago, and I really hated the middle one. What is that? Desolation of Smaug. I really hated the theatrical cut of Desolation of Smaug so much that I never even bothered watching Battle of the Five Armies in any capacity. And then, as my sister was coming to visit, she said, "I'm bringing the Hobbit extended editions. We can watch half of each one every night." And so we did, and I thought, well, since she's coming and she's bringing those movies, maybe I should finally get into this book. And there are a couple of audiobooks on YouTube. If you don't have a physical copy but you want to get into the book, you can do that on YouTube. As far as I know, they're legally there. They're not going to get taken down. But I read this while listening to the audiobooks. One of the audiobooks is narrated by Andy Serkis, who is an actor well known for his connection to The Hobbit. In this video, I don't know how long I'm going to ramble here. I want to do two things. One, I want to talk about the book, and then I want to talk about these movies, kind of do a compare and contrast thing. So, number one, this is going to get a lot of hate from me, probably, or people aren't going to care at all. I don't think that this book is actually that good. A lot of people really like Tolkien. I mean, a lot of people. And I'm going to say this. I think the man was very intelligent. He had like a whole bunch of college cred that I could never aspire to. The man was about 50,000 times smarter than me. He was very interested in language and ancient myth. I was reading about The Hobbit, and apparently most of the dwarf names that he has here are actually taken from a piece of Norse mythology from like 1200 AD or something. So he really liked ancient mythology. He did a translation of Beowulf. I believe he was fairly familiar with the saga of the Volsungs, which was the basis of Wagner's Ring Cycle. The man was very smart, very well read. He was very into language. He actually, I'm pretty sure he is the one responsible for the various elven languages that you see in the Lord of the Rings epic. I don't think that was a language that was created by anyone else. If I'm not mistaken, I think Tolkien actually created actual languages to be spoken by the characters in this world that he was creating. Or, as Tolkien once said, he didn't create this world, he discovered it. So the man was really smart. I am not going to deny that. But as a story, if I tried to do half the things that this book does in a creative writing class, they would bend me over and spank me until I could not sit down. There are so many things in this book where I was just scratching my head saying, why is the book doing this? Why isn't it doing it this way? And I think this is one of those situations. You probably heard people say, blank crawled so that such and such could run. You have this book that really creates the template for 20th century fantasy and fairy tales. This has elves and dwarves and dragons, and hobbits are kind of their its own thing for Tolkien. You don't really have hobbit equivalents in other books, but you have wizards. All of that inspired an entire generation of writers, and they would create stories using these same kind of archetypes in their own little fantasy worlds. They were inspired to do that, and then that in turn inspired other writers to say, okay, that's fine, but I want to do my own thing, and they wanted to kind of become the anti-Tolkiens. I think Patrick Rothfuss, he said he wanted to create a fantasy world unlike what you typically see in fantasy. I believe George R.R. Martin, he wanted to do something kind of against the grain of what Tolkien had blazed on the trail. So you have all these writers who were either inspired by Tolkien or they were inspired in a different way and wanted to go in a very different direction. So the man was very influential on 20th century fiction. But looking at this, I did not read this when I was a kid. I should point that out. This is a kid's book. I feel like it's a little bit more highbrow brow than your normal children's fantasy or children's fiction even. This is, like I said, about 300 pages. I think Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone if you're British, I believe that is also about 300 pages, a little more, but I think the print is bigger in a general Harry Potter book than it is here. You've got some kind of small print here, so this feels like more of an epic undertaking for a children's book than what I would have expected. If I was a kid and someone handed this to me and said, this is a kid's book, read it, I would have opened it up and looked at the first page and said no. This is a little heavy for 8-year-old me, but I did read it recently, and I read it in 2 days, again, listening to the audiobook while reading along with this physical copy. But some things that I did not care for. Number one, you have 13 dwarves who come to Bag End, this little tiny village out in the middle of nowhere, and they meet up with this hobbit named Bilbo. Bilbo actually first met up with the wizard who decided that he would be good to go on an adventure with these dwarves. The dwarves, they need somebody to go with them because 13 is an unlucky number. Even though Gandalf is with them for about half the quest, apparently he doesn't count as number 14. So Bilbo needs to be number 14. He is hired to be their burglar, or treasure hunter as they say in the book, and they are going to a mountain that's like on the other side of the planet that has been taken over by a dragon, and there are going to be many dangerous, perilous calamities along the way. And Bilbo is convinced to go along. Here's the thing. I don't think this book needed to have 13 dwarves. Most of these characters are not developed or characterized in any way. Most of the dwarves are fairly interchangeable. In fact, there are a couple of moments in the book where it will say something like, hey, we're over here, in quotation marks, said Balin, Dalin, and Wallen, and it will not even individualize each of these dwarves. If you watch the movies, I feel like it's a little easier, but even then, and I guess I'm kind of jumping around here, even then, about half the dwarves in the movies, I feel like you could have taken them out and you wouldn't really notice the difference. A few of them do get some good moments in the movies, but in the book, I think the only dwarf who actually feels like he has a developed character is Thorin Oakenshield, the leader. So if it was me, and Monday morning quarterbacking is really easy to do, it's especially easy when J.R.R. Tolkien died decades ago, and everyone on the planet is just going to be totally okay with me talking about things that I would have done different with this book. But if it was me, instead of having 13 dwarves who you can't tell apart because they don't have individual personalities of their own, I would have had it be one wizard, one dwarf, and then they come in and recruit a hobbit for some reason, because Smaug the dragon doesn't know what a hobbit smells like. Something like that. Having it be so many characters here, really, it gets in the way, I think. I don't think this needed to have that many characters. Most of them don't really have much of a purpose here. Like I said, in the movie, I think it does a better job of characterizing some of them, but in the book, not so much. So another thing about this is that it's very episodic. Each chapter really feels like its own story, and that can be both a blessing and a curse. If you wanted to take your time with it, if you didn't want to just barrel through it into... the hobbits going in the barrels in the river. Anyway, if you don't want to just burn through it as fast as I did, reading like one chapter a day, that might actually be a really good way to consume this book, because each chapter kind of feels like its own thing. At one point, they get captured by goblins, and that's when Bilbo meets Smeagol, or Gollum as he's called here, and that's where Bilbo gets the ring. And by the way, if you were thinking that J.R.R. Tolkien had all of the Middle-earth stuff planned out from the beginning, he very likely did not. There is not any indication here that the ring influences the behavior of whoever wears it. There's one brief moment where Bilbo thinks about killing Gollum, and then he doesn't. But other than that, we don't get any instance of Bilbo, the ring, it calls to me. You don't get any of that. It's just a ring that turns him invisible. And so that's an idea that he kind of landed on later, and I'm totally fine with that. But each chapter kind of feels like an individual little story. And if you were reading like one chapter a day, that would probably be fine. Reading it all at once, I kept thinking, man, I wish that this felt like more of a cohesive story and not a whole bunch of smaller adventures that the Hobbit and the dwarves go on. Also, speaking of Gandalf earlier, Gandalf, I feel like about a third of the way through this book, maybe a quarter of the way through the book, I feel like Tolkien realized that he had kind of written himself into a corner by having a wizard be part of the quest, because without defining everything that this wizard can do, without setting down some hard rules for what he can and can't do, you've kind of written yourself into a corner where this guy can just do whatever and write them out of whatever bad thing that they're involved with. If they're being chased by wargs, then Gandalf can set pine cones on fire and then set the wargs on fire, and pretty soon the whole forest is on fire. And Gandalf is such a powerful character compared to all of these normal people that you kind of feel like, why can't he just solve all of the problems? So there are like 2 or 3 moments in this book where Gandalf just disappears from the quest. At one point, he does tell them, hey, I'm leaving, I have something else that I have to do, and then he goes and fights a necromancer off screen. At one point, he does mention that he has a cousin named Radagast, who is in the movie, and I'll get to the movies here in a minute, but Gandalf, there's earlier, even before he says, hey, I have to go fight the necromancer, he goes and disappears for a couple of times, and I feel like that's Tolkien saying, oh wait, I probably shouldn't have this wizard be part of the quest because he's going to be able to easily solve all the problems that these guys encounter along the way. And that's a little sloppily done. Maybe that's where in a second draft you would have Gandalf tell the party at Bag End, I can't go with you, I have something that I need to do. And then you can have Bilbo kind of figure out some of this stuff on his own without an all-powerful wizard solving these problems for him. And that is something we do get to see Bilbo grow as a character in this book. He starts off, the dwarves, they're not impolite, but they don't really think much of him as someone who's going to be part of their adventure, as a burglar or a treasure hunter. They think of him, at one point one of them says, he looks more like a grocer, or he acts more like a grocer. But then there are several moments where Bilbo does something clever and saves everyone's lives, and then it says they like him a little bit more now thanks to this thing that he does. And I like that. I thought that was kind of cool. So let's talk about Thorin Oakenshield, who was the one dwarf that I feel like is actually given some character. He is a pretty cool character for the first 3/4 of the book. Basically, the dwarves, a long time ago, like over 50 years ago, they lived in this mountain. They were the kings of this whole area. There were humans who lived nearby. There were also elves who lived in the forest. And then this dragon comes and basically kills a whole bunch of people and drives all the dwarves out. And then a whole lot of humans died. I think some elves also died. And then now Gandalf, he somehow came across the map because Thorin's dad had it, and Thorin's dad was crazy because of the necromancer. And so Gandalf was finally able to find Thorin and say, here's the map to the mountain. You can get inside and you can get back what rightfully belongs to you. Thorin is on a quest to right a wrong, set right an injustice that has been done to him and his people. And you feel like you're on his side until they finally get to the mountain. And suddenly, Thorin is like, all of this is mine. I don't want to give any of this to anybody. Because Bard, he is a human being who lives near the mountain, and he kills the dragon in, frankly, a kind of anticlimactic way. The dwarves basically wake up the dragon, and then he leaves to go attack the human town, and then Bard kills it very quickly. And Bard comes and says, hey, the dragon stole some gold from us humans a long time ago too, so some of that does belong to us. And Thorin says, no, I want all of it for myself. And in the movies, they do talk about Dragonstank corrupting the gold, and so whoever comes in and wants to take the gold is going to become very greedy and paranoid. And that is the movie's explanation for why Thorin, his personality suddenly turns on a dime. But in the movies, there's also several moments where Thorin is acting a little gruffer, a little more like, I don't want to, I don't know, a little more like his later self in the last chunk of the movie than what the book would have you believe. Now, my sister was telling me, she's also read this book, she said that the Dragonstank was in the book. I did not remember hearing anything about them talking about Dragonstank, so I don't know if that was something in the book or if that's something that Peter Jackson invented. I could not remember anything about the dragon's gold or the dragon's presence corrupting whoever came back for the gold. And if that's the case, then that leaves a whole bucket bucket of worms open, because eventually, spoilers, Thorin does die, and then the gold is split up. Bilbo takes home some gold. Gandalf gets some gold. A lot of it goes to the dwarves, and there were some other dwarves who came in at the big battle at the end of the book, and then some of the elves get some of the gold. Some of the humans get some of the gold. Are all of these people going to suddenly be acting like all of this gold is mine, and it's going to corrupt them in the same way it corrupted Thorin? I don't know. And thematically, it does work, because you also had, in this book, Gollum, and he's willing to kill someone to get his ring back that Bilbo has stolen. Admittedly, he's willing to kill Bilbo even before he finds out that Bilbo has the ring, but when he does find out Bilbo has the ring, he's even more enraged, like, give me back that ring, it's mine. So, thematically, it does work, but there's a certain point in the book where suddenly I'm like, okay, I'm no longer on Thorin's side. And to be fair, neither's Bilbo. He kind of pulls some shady stuff to betray Thorin and try and stop a war from happening, try to give everyone what they want, but also he's kind of being sneaky about it, a little tricksy, if you will. And by the end of the book, Thorin does repent, but by then it's too late because he's dying. But I was a long time ago, I was having a conversation with my sister, and I said something about how Thorin becomes a bad guy at the end, and she said, no, he doesn't, and we kind of had a disagreement. She doesn't think that he becomes a bad guy, and she was explaining this most recent time is after I had read the book, and we were starting to watch the movies about Dragonstank, and how that's not entirely his fault, but like I said, in the movies, there are a few moments, even before they get to the mountain, where it feels like Thorin is already a little bit of a bad guy. Like, there's one point where Bilbo is risking his life inside the mountain, and Thorin hasn't even seen one coin of gold, and he's willing to just let Bilbo die. He says, I'm not going to risk my life for a burglar. So it feels like Thorin is already well on his way to becoming a little bit of a greedy jerk before they even get into the mountain. But in the book, he's pretty much a nice guy, and you feel like he's justified in taking this quest until they get to the mountain, and suddenly he says, I want all of this, it's all mine. But anyway, there's one part in the book where they are up in the trees surrounded by wargs, which are basically wolves, and then I turned a page and it says, what is all this calamity? Said the Lord of the Eagles, and I thought I had missed a page. I thought I had turned 2 pages by accident. That is not how you introduce a new character into your story. I was so perplexed by that. I was thinking, no. What you would do, what you should do is, Bilbo is up in a tree, the forest is on fire, he thinks he's going to die, he closes his eyes, and then he hears whoosh, and he looks beside him, and whichever dwarf was beside him is gone. And then he looks up, and he thinks he sees something in the clouds, and then whoosh, and then he looks beside him, and the other dwarf is gone. And then he starts to see, yeah, I think there's a bird over there, and then these birds start coming down and saving them, and then they land somewhere, and then one of the eagles says, hello, my name is whatever, Eddie Eagle, and I am the Lord of the Eagles. That's how you introduce a character. That's how you keep tension going in a pretty tense scene. You don't deflate it by having a character we have never met before suddenly say, what's going on here? And then coming in and saving the day. Also, by the way, anyone who ever watches the movies and says, why did the Eagles just carry them the whole way? In the book, it does explain that. Now, when you have like 85 hours of extended editions, admittedly, they could have explained it in the movie as well. It would have taken less than a minute, but basically the Eagles said, if we go too far, we're afraid that the men will shoot us down because they're afraid that we will steal their sheep. That's why the Eagles do not carry them the whole way, in The Lord of the Rings and in The Hobbit. But anyway, I thought this book was okay. I don't think that it is the be-all, end-all of fantasy that a lot of people think. Now, it's possible that when people hype up Tolkien that they're really talking about The Lord of the Rings. I have not read any of that either. But I do have those books, so that's probably what I'm going to be getting into very soon. But for now, I want to talk a little bit more about these movies. Number 1. I do not think that we needed 3 movies. I also don't think that we needed 3 movies that clocked in at like 4 hours apiece. There is a lot of stuff here that is in the book, but since I just got done talking about how I don't think the book is the best thing in the world, I don't think that you had to hear completely 100% faithful to the book. But I do think that the movies, in some ways, I think they improve on what the book did. I really liked the character of Balin in the movie. He is kind of there's kind of a dichotomy here between Balin and Thorin that reminded me of Hudson and Goliath from the cartoon Gargoyles. Also, kind of reminded me of Uncle Iroh and Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Kind of the older mentor figure to this younger, hot-headed guy. That was kind of the dichotomy I felt like I was getting in these movies that I did not feel like I got in the book. I don't even remember any conversation at all between Thorin and Balin in the book. But anyway, I also liked Philly and Killy. There's some really good stuff with them, especially later. Killy gets poisoned, and then he wants to go to the mountain, and Thorin says, no, you'll slow us down. And Killy just looks devastated. And then Philly says, I'm staying behind with my brother. And I really like those two characters. Now, unfortunately, that was, not even kidding, probably about 5 or 6 hours into this epic by the time I actually started to feel for these characters. But you also get some stuff that's not in the book that I don't think we needed. We have a brand new character, Tariel, who I don't even think exists in like the Silmarillion or the appendices or anything. I think she is 100% not a Tolkien character. She's played by the actress who played Kate in Lost. And I don't have a problem with you inventing new characters, but I would prefer them have something interesting to do in the movie. Basically, her role here is she and Killy exchange some sexual innuendos, and then she is willing to risk life and limb for this guy that she doesn't really know. By the end of the movie, Killy and Philly both die, and she is over here just crying her eyes out that this guy that she has spent about 5 minutes with is dead. He gives her this rock that her mom gave him. This is love at first sight, and anyone who knows me knows that I hate love at first sight. I didn't like it in Romeo and Juliet, I didn't like it in the Titanic, and I don't like it in the Hobbit movies. I would have preferred characters who actually know each other start to feel like they have feelings for each other. Maybe it would have been cool if Legolas and Tariel kind of had a thing. Just because we don't see her in The Lord of the Rings doesn't mean that these two couldn't have gotten together. There's like 60 years in between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, so these two could have been a thing. They've known each other for a really long time. It would have made more sense for these people who actually know each other to have fallen in love with each other. Not, hey, this woman, she gets hit on by this dwarf, and now she's willing to go out there and risk her life to save him, even though she doesn't know this guy. Hated that. Didn't mind the introduction of Tariel, although if I'm being honest, I don't think she really adds a whole lot. I feel like I read somewhere that Peter Jackson met her after they finished The Lord of the Rings, and he told her, if I ever return to Middle-earth, I'm creating a role for you. And then he did. But the role didn't really have much bearing on the story. We do kind of find out that because she's mourning Killy, that Legolas, who also has a thing for her, by the way, she mourning Killy, that's the reason that Legolas decided to go into exile, because his dad, played by Lee Pace, had exiled her at one point, and then Legolas said, well, if you exile her, I'm going into exile too. And then after the battle, I guess everything is forgiven, but then Legolas says, I can't go back home. I guess because she had her heart set on this dead dwarf, he can't go back home because there's no chance of him getting with her. It's not explained. It's really weird. And then my sister told me this reminded her of a scene from Revenge of the Sith. Lee Pace says, go to such and such, maybe Rivendell. There is a ranger there. His name is Strider. He also has another name that you must discover for yourself. And she said that reminded her of Yoda telling Obi-Wan, I've been talking to Qui-Gon Jinn's ghost. You can talk to him too. That was really ridiculous. We didn't need a scene telling us that Legolas is going to meet Aragorn. We know. We've seen The Lord of the Rings. Anyway, I feel like these movies were pretty bloated, but watching them this time, I didn't hate them as much as I did the previous time that I had watched the two theatrical movies, but at the same time, I probably am never going to watch these again. Certainly not the extended editions, because these aren't mine, but also, I'm probably not going to watch the theatrical cuts either. I feel like The Hobbit, both in book form and movie form, is just a weaker story than The Lord of the Rings. I prefer The Lord of the Rings. Part of that might be I had more of a childhood attachment to that. I was like 11 or 12 when the first Lord of the Rings movie came out, I think. Maybe closer to 13, I don't know. I was young, and so I have nostalgia for the Lord of the Rings that I don't have for The Hobbit, because I didn't read this until like a week ago, and while I had seen the theatrical cut of a couple of these movies years ago, hadn't seen these movies until earlier this week, so I thought these were okay, both the book and the movies. I thought they were alright. I didn't just love them, but I am willing to continue going through Middle-earth and seeing what else J.R.R. Tolkien has in store for me. So that is about all that I have to say about all of this. Hope you guys like this video, and I will see you guys in the future. Have a good one.